Okay, this is English 201, week 5, part 4, going fast. Okay, so it's those little clues that let you know that this is something important. That like, you want to keep your eye out for stuff like that. It's such an important line. It's the kind of line that when you're reading, it's like, oh, she entered his room as if she was entering the room of a sick person or a stranger, and you might just pass it and not even think about it. But because if you're just looking for summary, it's not summary. It's sort of summary because it's describing how she's walking. That's the summary part of it. She walks into his room just like you'd walk into a sick person's room or a stranger. So if you're just doing summary, you're like, oh, okay, I can completely picture how she's walking into his room. But when you're interested in something other than summary, such as metaphor, irony, and theme, um, that we, when you're interested in something else, that's a clue that you should kind of be paying extra attention to that. Okay, let's take a look here. Um, oh, Yep. Okay, fine. Sorry. I'm trying to. I thought there was maybe a glass of water I was going to duck my battery back into. Let's try this again. So he says he would rather go hungry than draw her attention to it. Although he did feel a terrible urge to rush forward from under the couch, throw himself at his sister's feet, and beg for something to eat. Again, a very very sad line. He would rather go hungry. He would rather go hungry than draw her attention to it. He'd rather starve to death than let his family know he needs something from them. It's very sad. Because he feels guilty. Because especially people like Gregor who take care of other people, do not want to be taken care of themselves. They feel guilty. They feel bad about it. But like, let me just throw this idea out here. He's been taking care of these people for years. Like they haven't had to like the business collapsed years ago, and he's been taking care of them for years. Just giving them free money, paying for their house, paying for all their stuff, paying for their food. All three of them. I'm going to throw out the idea here. Maybe they owe him a little bit. First of all, they should help him because he's their son and their brother. Help out your family. Not because they deserve it, but because they're your family. Maybe that's a place to start. Obviously, some people are fucking toxic, but you know what I mean. But like, maybe you should take care of your family members. Just a thought. Also, especially if that person has spent years and years and years taking care of you, it's not like, oh, I can't believe I'm forcing these people to take care of you, to take care of me. Like, I think maybe they owe you a little. You've been helping them out for years. They can take care of you when you get turned into a giant fucking cockroach, right? But Gregor feels guilty. He always feels guilty. Um, and that's a Kafka thing. That's an all Kafka shit. Characters feel guilty for no fucking reason. Um, he just feels bad because he's used to being the one in charge. But like, I don't think he should feel this way. Um, One of the things the story is about is guilt. All Kafka stories are about guilt on some level. He's very interested in the idea of guilt and how it works. Um, and the thing about the guilt in Kafka stories is characters always feel more guilty than they should. Like Gregor hasn't done anything wrong. He got turned into a cockroach. He can't go to work, but he feels guilty as if he's done some kind of sinful behavior. But there is no indication that he's done anything wrong. But he still feels this profound sense of guilt, but he can't locate where it's coming from. Some people, and this is also instilled in people for religious reasons, but for example, a lot of Catholics and a lot of Jews feel guilty all the time for no reason. They just feel guilty, like they've done some, because when you grow up, in these kinds of religions that spend a lot of time telling you what you've done wrong, you can just grow up with like a general sense of anxiety and guilt over nothing. People just feel bad. They just feel guilty. Why? They couldn't even tell you. And I think Gregor's in this situation. He feels very guilty. I couldn't ask my sister for food. Why not? He feels so guilty. Oh, she has to come in and clean my, like, that's okay. You've been taking care of these people for years. But it's a kind of free floating guilt that isn't connected to an object. One of the things Kafka's doing in the story is investigating how guilt works. And one of the ways that guilt works is people frequently feel guilty for no reason. Um, One of the reasons Kafka's so frustrating is because a lot of life doesn't make sense, and we go to stories because they do make sense, and it makes us feel comforted. When you go to Kafka, you're not comforted because it doesn't make sense, just like real life. Because the other thing people want is for stories to be realistic, and in a way, Kafka is realistic because in the real world, bad shit happens for no fucking reason, and in Kafka, bad shit happens for no fucking reason. So in some sense, that's realistic. Actually, I would say in many ways he's more realistic than a movie where good people get rewarded and bad people get punished. Because that doesn't seem super realistic to me. It seems like evil people get rewarded a lot and good people get punished for no fucking reason. So Kafka, in that sense, seems more realistic than a normally realistic movie. All right, let's see what else we got. Um, this is one of these horrible details. It's super important but very depressing. Um, he has a bowl with milk in it. She immediately picked it up using a rag, not her bare hands, and carried it out. Now I realize it's disgusting that her brother's been turned into a cockroach, but do you see how horrible it is that she won't touch something he's touched? It's like he has a very serious disease. She's treating him like something filthy, like something diseased. And again, obviously, I get that cockroaches are disgusting. I mean, if a cockroach was crawling on my bowl or something, I would definitely kill the cockroach and clean out the bowl. But this is her brother, and she's letting him know how she feels about him. That she picks up his bowl with a rag. She won't touch it with her bare hands. I mean, she could touch it with her bare hands and wash her hands afterwards. Like here, you know what? Simple thing. Your dog does all kinds of gross stuff. Probably, licks his own cats, lick their own butts or whatever. But they drink out of the bowl and you give them water. But I bet you just pick up the bowl and you wash your hands and you wash the bowl and you fill it up with fresh water. But do you pick up the bowl with a rag because you don't want to touch something the cat touched, even though the cat was like licking its own butt or whatever? Um, so it just like they don't even he's their brother, and they don't even treat him as good as you would treat a pet. Um, Although she does try. She has kind of a nice thing. And then we get a funny detail that there's actually some, and I mentioned this last time, that I know this is horrible to think about, and I know it's a silly idea, and you're going to roll your eyes at this, and I'm ridiculous for even saying this, but like Gregor's life kind of sucked before. He has a job that he hates, and a family that doesn't appreciate him, and his life was totally miserable, and all he does is work all day. He's been turned into a cockroach. Maybe that's is it no? It doesn't occur to anyone that that's maybe an improvement. He does seem, though, every once in a while to be happier as a cockroach. It's very rare, but it happens. It happens right here, for example. Um, his injuries must all because remember he got injured when his father when he came out of the room to show himself to his family for the first time. They drove him back in the room and he got stuck in the door and his father shoved him and he got injured on the side. Um, So he says his injuries must already have completely healed, as he found no difficulty in moving. Well, this amazed him, as more than a month earlier he has cut his finger slightly with a knife. He thought of how his finger still hurt the day before yesterday. So, like, interestingly, he's actually stronger as a cockroach, right? Like, he's actually healthier? I don't know. Like, his body heals much faster. That's interesting. Like, there's a couple of moments. I mean, they go by like lightning, but it's just that no one in this story has the imagination to think maybe it's cool he got turned into a cockroach. Um, yeah, there are some, and of course, the other big advantage to being turned into a cockroach that makes his life much better is he doesn't have to go to work. Um, he has a terrible job, and now he doesn't have to go to work. And I don't know. Do you know people who like just work all the time and work, 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 and they're so stressed all the time, every day. And then their bodies just collapse. They just get sick and they're sick for days. It's almost like their body is forcing them to take a fucking break. Like if you don't take a break, you'll get sick and then your body will force you to take a break. And except if you let your body force you to take a break, you're going to spend it sick on the couch watching movies. But it's kind of nice to sit on the couch and watch movies if you're not too sick. Um, Gregor, being a cockroach, has forced him to be away from work. But that guy needed to get away from work. He had a terrible job and an unappreciative family. And so, in some sense, there's something good for him in there. Um, all right, and let's talk a little bit more about his family's relationship to him in the next quote. Um, Gregor's father and mother certainly did not want him to starve either, but perhaps it would have been more than they could stand to have any more experience of feeding him than being told about it. Perhaps his sister wanted to spare them what distress she could, as they were indeed suffering enough. So the sister feeds Gregor, right? She brings him little scraps of food. It's actually kind of sweet. She gives him different kinds of food so he can pick out what he likes and she can learn about him. That's actually kind of a nice moment. These moments are kind of short lived, but she's sweet for that moment where she's trying to figure out what he needs. But the idea that like they don't want him to starve, but they don't want to look at him either. So the mother and father don't feed him. Like it's not like they want him to starve, but they're not actually willing to feed him because he's sort of too gross to look at. Um, and again, I think many of my students have experienced these kinds of splits with family where family does not want to be around you anymore because they find you repulsive for whatever reason. If you're gay or if you're transgender or if you switch religions on them or, you know what I mean? Like there's all kinds of things you can do to upset your family. Who you're supporting politically can do that. And this is very much about that, this kind of rift in the family where, again, Gregor becomes like a stranger to them. Even though he's their son, they treat him like she walks into his room like he's a stranger, because that can happen when you change and you feel like your family doesn't really know about you because they don't care. Um, remember, they can't understand him when he's a bug. I'm not super sure they understood him before he was a bug. They didn't seem to appreciate they'd had a job that he hated. All right, I'll see you in the next video.